Every summer for the past 10 years, some subset of my children have been at sleepaway camp. For those of you who have sent children or grandchildren to sleepaway camp, you know that one of the features is the summer camp letter. When we began, that letter was sent with stationery and a stamp. Remember those? Now it's available with the click of a button. When those letters were by post, it wasn't hard to come up with content for a once-a-week snail mail. But now, a daily letter is expected. Consider, though, these constraints. One, you can send your letter quickly, but the reply comes slowly. By the time you get your reply, whatever it was that you had asked your camper will have long ago become irrelevant. 2, camp professionals advise that it is unhelpful to share how very much you miss them. Imagine. And 3, you can send news from the world outside, but you're kindly requested to keep it upbeat. Yeah, good luck with that. Coming up with content under these conditions is, shall we say, tricky. So a few years ago, I decided upon a strategy. Every day, I would send a quote of the day, a pithy observation in poetry or prose to inspire without a need for reply. For the 4th of July, of course, the focus is on the patriotic. In recent years, we've sent copies of the full Declaration of Independence. We've sent Washington's farewell address. We've even sent quotes from the musical Hamilton. This year, as I searched for material, though, I landed upon President John F. Kennedy's famous charge, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," which made me both proud and a little sad. Because when was the last time that we as a culture asked such a question? Whether left or right, our culture today is often preoccupied with what's in it for me. And I'm not discounting that question. That's an important question, sometimes a critical question. After all, as Hillel so famously said, "Im ein ani li mili," if I am not for myself, who will be for me? And we Jews have too often experienced the sting of that truth here in America, especially in this year of roiling anti-Semitism. Who could blame us for not being especially focused on service towards country at this moment? After all, when our community is in crisis, the primacy of the first part of that phrase takes precedence. But of course, we also know that that's not where Hillel's quote ends. Instead, Hillel added, "If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when?" So, as we gather on this 4th of July weekend, I want to invite us to dwell for a moment on the value of asking, even now, especially now, what can I do for my country? Why? Because, as the UK's new Prime Minister-elect so eloquently said, service is a precondition of hope. We see that today in Israel, where as bleak as this moment is, our Israeli brothers and sisters are fueled by a deep sense of purpose and mission and service. I learned this week about a 40-something nurse and mother who had never served in the IDF, who signed up and completed basic training with 18-year-olds, just so that she could have a new way to make a difference. In northern Israel, a husband and wife, Lydia and Igor Katliana, who escaped the war in Ukraine only to find themselves 6 miles from the Lebanese border at this terrible time, looked at the bomb shelters all around them, and they chose to brighten the landscape by covering them with beautiful murals. Firmly down to earth, Lydia reflected, you want to lift people's spirits, you want to do something, but at the same time, you know what these bomb shelters are for, and that this is a time of war. It's war, she said, but life still goes on. Harvey Mammon, who just returned with our wonderful Temple Emmanuel group from Hartman in Jerusalem this summer, welcome back to those of you who are here, shared that on a visit to Micha Goodman's Mabua, formerly Beit Prat, our members met with a young woman graduate from the program. Now, you may have heard that there are thousands of internally displaced in Israel today. In Jerusalem, a hotel was filled with refugees from the north. So she asked, what can we do to help? Well, how about a camp to keep our kids busy, came the reply. Jumping into action, she, together with a group of other Mabua volunteers, came to do a camp. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. But as the days went on, it became clear to them. These kids don't need a camp. They need the normalcy, the hope of school. So what did they do? They threw together a curriculum, recruited teacher volunteers from Jerusalem locals and from among the displaced, and determined that these kids would have the highest quality education that anyone could provide. The academic year just concluded with every single one of these students meeting or exceeding national standards. How do we find that fire of service that plants hope, especially when, to quote Lydia Katliana, we know what the bomb shelters are for? Well, Rabbi Danny Gordis spoke this week on his podcast with a young man, Ro'i, who he shares that on October 7th fought for 26 hours in various kibbutzim, for months in Gaza, and has known a real, genuine personal loss. And yet, when asked about his emotional state, Ro'i answered by sharing a story of his family. He said, remember that people before us not long ago, my father and grandfather, they have witnessed terrible disasters. What changed? I believe, Ro'i said, that they looked ahead. First of all, when those things happened, they fought back, but their energy was directed to create and for a better future. They had a belief. They weren't as far from remembering as we are that they have no other place. So the first thing he said that helps me in being optimistic is knowing that I'm a part of a larger story, of a people that is always going through some hard times. But he continued with this insight. He said, "It hit me that our national anthem starts with conditional words, as long as if we tell ourselves that this place has a condition, as long as the Jewish soul yearns within us." What is the name of that anthem? He continued, of course, Hatikva, hope, the hope. So, my take on hope, he concluded, is that in some periods of life, hope is very frequent and you don't need to ask yourself why you're hopeful. But in many times, it's not, like our days. But I believe that this, he said, is the most significant thing we can create in our days: hope for better days. And once we have this, we'll start to rebuild ourselves for the future, for a better future. How do we cultivate hope both for Israel and here at home? Well, this week's Parsha has an interesting path. It's an inversion. Korach's populist preaching seems poised to overturn Moses. But Moses answers not just with words, but with action, with service, standing before God for the people. He turns Korach's challenge into an opportunity to revisit core commitments, to return to a deeply felt mission, which transforms the moment. Instead of just revolt, Parshat Korach therefore becomes a story of recommitment and renewal. Interestingly, we have this in American history too. Do you know the story behind the Star-Spangled Banner? Anyone know it? Francis Scott Key was detained on a British ship during the Battle of Baltimore as they bombarded our coastline. So violent was the attack, he was sure that the coast would fall. As rockets lit up the sky throughout the night, his hope started to fade. But as sunrise came, it was not destruction just that he saw, it was the glimmer of what was left. In the words that he wrote that we still sing today, the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Yes, the bombs were there, but so was our flag, and that meant that we still had hope. We still had something to do, hope which would find fulfillment year by year in the hard work of building our nation, which continues to this day. We can always see what is wrong. Especially now, it's clear and easy to identify. Our Torah today, though, and our commemoration this week of American independence invite us to flip the script, to cultivate vision that sees past the rockets, a vision to see not just the tatters of our fraying flag, but its wave, a vision that invests and reinvests ourselves in kol od. As long as we continue to roll up our sleeves and work towards it, there will be tikva, hope. There's an old American pastoral saying, after the service begins. What will be your service? We rise.